Good evening, everybody, and welcome back then to another LFM stream here for Season 8. We are back after some fantastic stuff. Last time I had Season 7 of the Pro Series. The Pro Series returns even better than ever. We have got an absolutely incredible field of drivers that will be taking to the circuit tonight, and I am absolutely buzzing to see how they get on. And also do just want to make a quick mention of a big thank you to the title sponsor of the Pro Series of Season 8, Case King. You can link in the description. You get all of your PC component building components there. And then you can start to put together your own setups to get on track with some of these guys. So huge thanks and a shout out to them. And also you can check out the other sponsors of LFM in the description as well. But yes, Season 8 then, we are back after some fantastic action last time in the Pro Series. It was Marco Bischoff, the German, that ended up taking the crown. It was a duel all the way to the final race with Jardier, but the consistency and the outright pace that Marco showed throughout the whole season was enough to bring the title home for himself. Jardier having to settle for second in the end, but we have a very exciting setup going into this because we know that Jardier maybe didn't quite have the right pick of the car in the end once those BOP changes came in. But BOP is a little bit more settled now than what we had last time, and that has meant that we've had quite a shuffle in terms of the cars that people are trying at the moment, and we have such a brilliant and varied set that we are going to see on the grid tonight. I've seen BMWs, Porsches, Audis, Aston Martins, Ferraris, McLarens, Mercedes. We have the lot, and don't forget the Hondas as well. And it gives us such a fantastic premise for some brilliant action for the season opener here in the Pro Series in Season 8. And of course, where are we? Well, we are at nowhere other than Imola, which will be playing host for tonight's action. And it is such a fantastic circuit. Let's have a little bit of a look at a track guide for this one. 16 turns of absolute chaos and just so much commitment that these drivers will have to show during this race to absolutely extract everything from their cars. Going through that first opening series of corners, so tricky to get the car hooked up, and then through 5 and 6 really have to be hard on the apexes there to really get it hooked up over the curbs, and so you can get yourself turned into each of those corners, and then whipping around through Tosa, up the hill into Piratella, and then down into Acqua Minerale, probably arguably one of the most difficult corners around this circuit, before climbing up the hill to the next big challenge of the chicane of 11 and 12. That is going to be somewhere these drivers are really having to be committed with their cars and comfortable with their setup, and then run back down the hill, go through the final couple of corners, and then on the run back towards the start-finish line to see out the lap. It's going to be so interesting to see how all of these cars and how these drivers adapt to this circuit and where they all sit with these new changes. Traditionally, Imola's been a circuit where things like the Aston Martin at times has been incredibly quick around this circuit, and with the changes it's seen, it could be very strong again. Traditionally, things like the Ferrari and the McLaren have struggled at times because the curbs really do start to unsettle those cars, and it just stops the drivers from being able to attack as aggressively as they might otherwise want to. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And before we get into qualifying, which should get going in a few minutes' time, I do just want to have a bit of a run through the drivers that we have registered in this top split this evening, because we have a fantastic grid. I think also possibly, I could be wrong, but a record number of sign-ups for the Pro Series this evening as well, which is fantastic to see so many getting involved in all of the action. And just waiting for, I think the website may be struggling a little bit at the moment because we've just got that many people registered. So hopefully I can get the full list up in a second. But I know for a fact that we have the likes of Marco Bischoff and Jardier returning to the series. We've got George Boothby, Samir Fock, Valentine Barrier. We've got the likes of Malinowski, Darren McCormack, all registered for tonight, which is absolutely brilliant. And so much other talent in the field as well. Who else do we have that is going to be taking to the circuit? And No, I will actually have to give up on that because I think we've just got that many people registered that it's a little bit slow at my end. But no worries, we will find out soon enough as when the server switches over and we can then start to see how they all tackle this circuit. We've got some returning names from last season. We've also got some new names as well, which gives us some very exciting prospects to see. Will it be Marco Bischoff trying to defend his title, or is he going to be trying to, just trying to stay competitive? Are we can have some new people bringing a challenge to the championship battle. Will Jardier be in a stronger mix? I'll keep it a little bit of a surprise for those that don't know what car that he's gone for this season, and whether or not the likes of George Boothby, who was so competitive last season but joined a little bit late to be outright at the top of the standings as we got to the tail end of the season, joining from the first race, he could certainly be someone to watch because we know exactly what he is capable of at times. We've also got the likes of Del Fanta joining us again, Alexander Smolia, Grantis Korekas on the field, Joris Pell, Valentine Barrier, Soldatov, Noah Eder, Vassner, Luke Addison. So many familiar names from last season, but we've got some new contenders as well, which makes it so interesting for all of us. And the average ELO going into the top split this evening is almost up at 4K. So these really are the tippy top, best of the best drivers on the LFM platform. And speaking of which, if you want to get involved in some of this racing yourself, then go to the lowfuelmotorsport.com website, get yourself registered, get yourself a license, and you could be battling out on track with some of these guys very soon as you work your way through the ranks. And we have seen time and time again in this series that you always have fantastic battles up and down the field, regardless of what split you're in. It's just brilliant to see so much action on circuit, and I have no doubt that the Pro Series is going to provide us with some electric action, as always, this evening. So I think the server will be up in just a moment. We can head over for qualifying and see how each of our drivers get on. Also, an interesting note going into this evening, weather could be playing a little bit of a factor into this. We have 31% chance of overcast conditions, we've got 15% chance of rain, and 30% chances of changeable conditions as well. So that all starts to potentially play into how all of these guys are going to be setting up their car. How do they try to set out for the race? How aggressive are they? How prepared are they for those changing conditions? Do you go for something that only suits the dry? Do you go for something that is amazing in the wet? Or do you try to balance it somewhere between the two? We'll have to see who comes out on top in all of that. So check in on the server now. I think it should hopefully be up and running. And it is. So let's make our way into the server. I shall get us moved across in just a moment when they are ready to go. But yeah, with the way that all of this is lined up, which car is going to be more competitive is certainly an interesting question. And well, we haven't gone into qualifying just yet, but I will just say that the conditions, at least in the free practice build-up, are looking interesting. So we'll see whether or not that carries over into qualifying, but that could certainly give us some interesting action. In actual fact, is everything appearing okay at my end? I'm not 100% sure. Unfortunately, bear with me for just a moment. Do just want to make sure everything is up and running properly before we move over to the main broadcast. I think everything is working okay. Just so we do have drivers out on the circuit at the moment, but it is still showing as practice. And I think we should be switching over for qualifying in a short while. So I'll keep an eye on all of that. And then when we make our way into qualifying, I shall move the cameras across. In the meantime, I do also want to say a big thank you to all of the support and the response on the recent announcement of Season 8, as well as LFM's integration of R-Factor 2. Yes, R-Factor 2 is on the way for LFM, which will provide some fantastic competitive racing for people as well to get involved with. Another brilliant sim, and have to see what is on the horizon for all of that. And I think I will switch us over to the drivers out on circuit for the moment. I imagine we will switch over to qualifying in just a second. But let's see how everybody is getting on for the time being. But the conditions that I did slightly allude to, we do in fact have rain on the circuit as it stands. So that could prove very telling to which of our drivers end up feeling the most comfortable, which of them are going to be performing at their best in these conditions, who is able to extract the most out of their car. And a little bit of update from the boss man himself, so that is why we have an extra 10 minutes of practice then before we head into qualifying. So thank you for the info there, Boris. That settles my concerns on that front. But yeah, brilliant. So everything working as planned. It's just merely the commentator having a little bit of a moment. So let's see then who is able to extract the most out of their car in the opener, as everything appears to be going a little bit wonky there. There we go. To apologise for the slight clunkiness at times. Unfortunately, I do all of this on a single monitor, and it does get a little bit tricky to manage at times. And I think everything now is in working order on that front. But we'll have to see then who is able to shoot to the top of the timesheets in practice. We've got 5 minutes of practice left to go, but this could prove very, very vital for all of our drivers if it does maintain rainy conditions going into the next session. Walsingham, and then quickly followed up by George Boothby, goes up to the top of the timesheets for the time being. And that Ferrari may be not the most outright competitive in the rainy conditions, but when it comes to their performance in the rain, that could be when the Ferrari really starts to come into its own, as one of the cars dives off just in front of the George Boothby. That was one of the Porsches there. Let's have a bit of a look through who else do we have in our field. Darren McCormack in the Aston Martin. What car that I think, Darren, we've seen all too often in this one, but he shoots up to the top of the standings for the time being, and with a healthy gap as well as everyone starts to find their feet. Alexander Smolia in the Honda slots in just behind. Everyone continuing to find time and get themselves comfortable in these conditions before making their way over to qualifying. So we'll have to see how telling it is, but it does tend to give us a good indication of who some of our main protagonists for the race victory could be. See if we got our previous champion, defending champion of that, Marco Bischoff, running around on circuit at the moment as well. I think he might be just starting to put together his first efforts for the time being, and it's good enough to get himself up towards P2, so bringing the Porsche along at the moment for a good result, I have to say. Keep an eye on Darren McCormack, who will have invalidated his lap. They're just getting a little bit enthusiastic with the track limits coming out of Aqua Minerale. Then got to be so careful with all of that, but he was travelling very, very quickly. Noah Eder goes up to the top of the standings by 7 thousandths of a second. Great lap there from the K Kramer Racing Esports driver. They are the defending teams champions from last season. As just keeping an eye, see Alexander Smolia absolutely taking huge chunks of curb at the moment through the 14-15 chicane. Have to be so committed through there to extract time, but it's so easy for the car to get unsettled and to get away from you. Noah Eder continuing to find a great deal of time on his lap as well. He's half a second up as he makes his way through Tosa, but I think Alexander Smolia might be looking to try to have a say, making a break towards the top of the standings. The number 6 car in that VTEC powered Honda, seeing what he can do, and it is good enough to go up to the top of the leaderboards by 0.4 of a second. And let's actually go on board with this man as he takes us for a stop on the left-hand side of the track. Let's do someone else. I thought we were going to see a great finishing lap there. For maybe we'll wait till qualifying and see when we go on board, because we are running out of time in the practice session. We see that rain continuing to get more and more intense, and with changeable conditions, One thing that you really need to be careful of is not just how you set up your car, obviously, to deal with the rain, but when you've got these changing amounts of rainfall on the circuit, that affects your tyre pressures. It obviously changes the level of grip of the car as well, and you sometimes also have to make some adjustments for ride height, trying to make sure that you're not bottoming out on those puddles when it starts to get really, really heavy. But tyre pressures can definitely be affected, even brake temperatures as well, and trying to keep all of that inside of the operating window can be a very difficult task. Just behind George Booth, we see his Yassi teammate, Massimo Malinowski, who I do believe joined us for maybe 1 or 2 races last season. Great to see him back out on circuit as well. Obviously a formidable driver, very, very quick, and an absolute Porsche specialist, a little bit like how Marco Bischoff has become in recent times on this game. We'll have to see what the number 18 car can do today. But one absolutely fantastic grid. To see what other drivers we have here as well. We've got the likes of Robbie Stapleford, who seems to be slightly merged with an Aston Martin at the moment. Korekis, who is sporting the Porsche, the number 7 car. And who else do we have running around at the moment? Del Fanta has switched over from the Audi, so he finds himself in the BMW. And also another driver who has made a switch is Jardier. He has gone over to the Honda now. So that car has been very quick as of late. It's been an absolute rocket ship in a straight line. It's kind of become a bit like a new version of the Audi Evo 2 when that car first came out, because the acceleration and top end of that car is absolutely mighty. So we'll have to see how the beloved streamer ends up adapting to that one, and see if he manages to make himself more competitive over, on average, across season. I mean, he still took 3 wins in Season 7. There was nothing poor whatsoever about Jardier's performance, but Marco Bischoff was just in a league of his own all season long, and his consistency and able to stay out of trouble, as we now see a hybrid between a Porsche and a Honda, yeah, that was what gave Bischoff the advantage in the end. And these guys are competing for some pretty great prizes. Once again, there was some fantastic prize pool of money for the top 3 finishers in Season 7. This time around, there is a mixture of some monetary prizes and also equipment as well, which I'm sure these guys would love to get their hands on. As we see just some of our drivers finishing off some laps then, before we end up diving into qualifying and seeing exactly what conditions these guys are all going to be battling with and contending with in these cars. We have such a brilliantly varied set of drivers tonight. Just looking at the manufacturers on the graphic on the left, you see such a great variance of cars, which is going to make it so interesting for the trade-offs, not just in qualifying, but being able to maintain the tyres throughout the race and competing potentially in changeable conditions, as well as we do then make our way over for qualifying, and we'll have to see how they all get on, as it is most definitely raining. But the interesting aspect actually of all of this is the rain is going to get less. So Watkins Glen last season, we saw that, I think it was Marco Yonkers from memory, was able to get a really good early lap into qualifying and was able to get pole position before the rain really started to come down. Now we've got an ongoing drying track, so these guys are going to be going out constantly and fueling up their car for long runs, because chances are that the last one to cross the line is going to be the one that contends with the best condition. As I do believe it will be Alexander Smolia that will lead our drivers away. You can see all of that spray kicking up from the back of that Honda. But let's see what it is like sitting inside the cockpit of this car. And number 6 will take us for a lap. And you can see you've got to be so careful with not just the curbs, that are obviously so much more slippery with this rain coming down. As he really struggles to try to get stopped in Aqua Minerale there. Imagine the Honda is very twitchy. It's such an agile car, which is why, combined with its horsepower, it's really started to come into form as of late with the new BOP. But it is most definitely a tricky car to extract pace out of at times, because it does have a tendency to really let go. And in these wet conditions, it could be a struggle for some of our drivers to extract everything from that car. We'll have to see what all of them managed to do. Smolia coming into the final couple of corners then to take us for a lap of the Imola circuit. So the first qualifying lap of Season 8 then is about to get underway with Alexander Smolia in the number 6 Honda. He powers his way down the start-finish straight, and then immediately after crossing the line, he goes through a rather trivial turn 1, and then continue all of that momentum. This is where the Honda will really shine in straight line speed, and then heavy on the braking zone as you approach that 100-meter board, down the gears. In second, going deeper than he would have wanted, and we're not going to see a complete lap from the number 6 because he's already spun around on the very first corner. So let's see who else unfortunately we can pick up. I wonder if perhaps that was a little bit of a commentator's curse for poor Alexander, who did not quite manage to deal with these tricky conditions in the way that he would have liked, but still plenty of time in the session to extract some pace. So let's instead go on board with Dario Imola in the 29 Aston Martin. Let's see if this car, the front-engined Aston, may be able to deal with these conditions a little bit better. Hard on the power then through that opening series of corners, trying to carry all that momentum on the run towards turn 5 and 6. You'd see them in the dry making use of that entry curb. They'll be a little bit more wary of that this time around in these wet conditions as they flirt their way through the track limits, trying to avoid any major puddles and not get caught up on the exit curves too much, because even though the car may stay stable, you end up kicking in that TC just a bit too much. You lose momentum, and that can be a big downside for these guys when they're trying to extract the maximum from their lap time. Dario, though, keeping it clean so far, climbing up the hill towards Piratella. Gets a little bit of twitch through the apex, but keeps it all together. Yellow flag brought out for Benjamin Langer, I think, who's just retired to the pits. And someone else goes off ahead. That's one of the K. Kramer Racing Esports cars. I'm not sure if that is Marco Bischoff or Noah Eder. Will stick on board with Dario as he rounds out the lap, climbing up the hill towards the very tricky chicane. It's difficult enough at the best of times. Through 14 and 15, runs wide. Got to be so careful of those sausage curbs on the exit. Not only is that an absolute pain for track limits, but they can be very dangerous, particularly in these conditions for unsettling the cars. Very much for the Ferrari and McLarens that we have on the grid. Dario getting surprisingly aggressive with that entry curve, trying to really widen this corner. Goes a little bit deep though into the final turn. That's not going to do his lap any good, but he does manage to at least get a fairly clean lap to close it out. And the number 29 Aston Martin, where will he sit on the timing sheets for the time being? It's good enough for 9th place, but right now, top of the standings is another one of the Aston Martins. It is Derry McCormack, who is absolutely loving these conditions at the moment. He's 0.4 of a second up, 0.5 of a second up on his previous lap time, and Jardier sitting in P2 for the time being. He was only 0.08 of a second adrift on the previous lap, although with the delta that Derry is managing to put together at the moment, I'm not sure he'll be able to quite stick with the Aston Martin as the session goes on, but it is drying out all the time. Philip Menard in the Mercedes. Good lap from him to get into the mid-49s and go up into P3. Maciej Malinowski currently sitting in P4, fastest in the final sector in that Porsche. And then we've got Robbie Staple for one of the G2 esports drivers, currently sitting P5 in his BMW M4. And George Boothby sitting in P6. But I'm going to have to keep an eye on Derry McCormack because he is absolutely flying at the moment. The Irishman dealing with these conditions very, very nicely. And the Aston Martin has always been a car well suited to the wets. It naturally has very, very good downforce. The front engine or sort of configuration of this car is very nice to work with. It's incredibly good in a straight line. The TC is nice once you tune it. You tend to see lower TC1 settings and high TC2 for the Aston Martin. It just blends so nicely. You can be so confident on the power. Meanwhile, Valentine Barrier shoots up to the top of the standings. I don't think he'll be for too long though. Jardier topples in, but Derry McCormack trying to snatch away pole position again. He does. The first man into the 48th. Derry McCormack in the 28. Going very quickly though is Maciej. He has found the second in the Porsche. Not a car that is always as competitive in the wet because it can be tricky to set up, but Maciej trying to show exactly why he's one of the fastest drivers on this game, and he's maintained that delta all the way to the line. I think it is good enough for provisional pole by 0.2 of a second. Maciej shoots up to the top of the standings in the Porsche. Carreras goes into P3 into another one of the Porsches. And all of these times continuing to topple down. Sasha Vassner in the number 15 Audi found 0.8 of a second on his lap. That would be good enough, potentially challenge towards the top 5 for the Audi. It's good enough for P7. Lost a little bit on the run out of the final corner. We've got Dario, but it's 0.3 of a second up on his lap. He's a little bit earlier on, though. What about Romano Berenic in the Porsche? He goes up to P12, found 0.8 of a second on his lap. Massier has found a couple of tenths, though, and is going purple once more, so he is really thriving in these conditions. We've got Pennanen that is 3/4 of a second up. Gareth Fullen has found half a second in the opening sector. And all of these drivers continuing to find time as the track dries up. You'll see them at different points coming into the pits, resetting their tyre pressures to try to account for those changes in the track conditions, because they will start to burn out these wet tyres and will want to get a fresh set of boots on as quick as possible. Pennanen, very nice through the last couple of corners, has found a second on his previous time. That should see him climb up in towards the top 20 potentially. As he runs towards the line, the Finn in the 34 car trying to climb up the order, and it is good enough to sit right on the bubble then for P20. Where are some of our other drivers at? Massier coming to the end of his lap. He's absolutely back and forth on the Delta at the moment. He's perfectly level, but he does get a compromised exit and will retire to the pits. Meanwhile, someone else that is coming into the same part of the circuit, Noah Ida, the number 14 car, showed great pace at times at certain circuits last time out in Season 7. What can the German do? He's 4/10 up on his current lap. That might see him get into the 48s if he carries it towards the line. It's good enough for P6, and it is into the 48s, a 48.955 for the number 14 car. As everyone starts to go through some of that changeover, Marco Bischoff has found a couple of tenths in the opening part of the lap. Alexander Smolia in the Honda has managed to climb his way up to P4, so continuing to find pace in the Honda. A little bit more than Jardier can manage at the moment. I think he's about to head out onto a flyer, so have to see what he can do. And see the conditions, the rain is gradually lightening, but it was actually going to resurge a bit at the tail end of the session, so these drivers will probably be pleased that that will be well after qualifying ends, but this could very much set us up for an exciting race if these wet conditions are here to stay. We'll stay looking at Jardier for the time being, although whereabouts is George Buffy? He's actually a little bit further on in the lap and has found a couple of tenths of a second as well, so we'll stick with the Ferrari, 3-time winner last time in Season 7, and potentially would have had a very good shot at the championship if he had been part earlier on. That's a little bit wide though on the exit of the very outer chicane, and that's what you've got to be so careful of. The Ferrari, that's particularly where that car is going to get a little bit on the unsettled side, does not deal with the bumps very well, and he lost a considerable amount of time. He has managed to at least carry a 10th heading towards the line, but he certainly would have been hoping to find a bit more than that. We know that there's additional pace in that car. It will be a small improvement though, and it will see him climb no positions, unfortunately, but someone that's going extremely quickly is the man that finished P2 in the standings last time. He is purple at the moment, has found half a second on his lap, and this is very much on the pace with Malinowski that currently sits on provisional pole. Jardier coming into the final couple of corners then, trying to see if he can carry the momentum. Runs a little bit wide through the penultimate corner, sets himself up though for a half-decent exit. He is losing time though on the run towards it. Might be good enough to go onto the front row for the time being. I'm not sure if it's going to be good enough for pole though, as he hits a timing beam. He slots just in behind Darren McCormack, 600ths away, and Jardier goes up into third place. But we know that there is additional pace in that car, much like Boothby's lap. Much like a lot of these drivers, I'm sure it's all about trying to hook up the lap here in these tricky conditions. It's so easy to make a mistake, and it's such a testament to the talent of all of these guys when they do manage to put it together, as Del Fanta does exactly the opposite. And unfortunately, that is going to be a hefty invalidation for him. Meanwhile, Robbie Stapleford down in 21st position at the moment, almost gained a second though, over a second, much better exit than his previous lap time, trying to challenge all the way up towards the top 5 of the BMW driver. Can he do it? And he does go on towards P4 on a 48.6. for the number 27 car. So Stapleford up in towards the top 5. Good stuff there from him. Smolia has found 0.3 of a second up on his lap. That could see him get up into the top 5 as well and try to reclaim that P4 position. Someone else is going very, very quickly. Aidan Walsingham, previously driving the McLaren. Now we see him in the number 22 Porsche. Has found 0.9 of a second on his lap. So where will this see him climb up to? It's good enough for P8 for the Brit. And that is a very nice effort there from a driver that showed some really strong pace at times. Meanwhile, Alexander Smolia going very, very quickly, half second up and going purple in parts of this lap. And this could very much be a shot for provisional pole. You got a good exit out of the final corner. I think it might be just about good enough to snatch provisional away from Malinowski. And it is Smolia up to the top of the time sheets, but Malinowski has something to say about it because just slightly further down the order, he is on a purple lap time for the time being. You can see by the deltas, this is going to be so, so close. It's going back and forth. What can the pole do? Oh, it's so close. It's 0.005 of a second away from Alexander Smolia. He will get a couple more attempts, but Malinowski then, for the time being, unable to reclaim pole position. Korekis through the chicane, 0.3 of a second up on his lap time. This could see him challenge up towards the front row as well, though he did lose a little bit on the exit. Walsingham has found some time. Joris Appel coming into the final couple of corners has got a couple of tenths up as well. Philip Menard further down the order is up 0.3. We'll have to see what he can do. I think Appel got a little bit of a compromised exit and that final corner, so it won't be as much of a gain. It is good enough to break in towards the top 10 though. Malinowski, first thing, we're going purple once again. What about Korekis? He's a 10th up on his lap time. Good enough to maybe scrape in towards the P5 spot. Not quite. 0.06 of a second away from Stapleford, so he will stay put for the time being. Hugo Merles down in 29th position. We know he is very fast in the Ferrari. Only good enough, though, for P20 for the time being. Samir Fock has found a couple of tenths, as has Hugo Boucher in the 26 car. Trying to find cars that are at the tail end of their laps. We've got a lot of drivers at the further down the order finding time. Although I do need to check in on Alexander Smolia, who is absolutely blitzing his previous lap time. 0.4 of a second up. As he heads towards the line, he got a little bit of a compromised exit, but this could absolutely shatter anyone else's hopes of getting provisional pole. The Honda trying to storm towards pole position here for the season opener. It's almost a 47 from the number 6 car, a 48.027, and an absolutely astonishing lap time there from Smolia, really laying down the gauntlet. Someone else is travelling very quickly, trying to get themselves towards the front row, is Noah Eder. He is 0.7 of a second up on his lap time. Got Korekis on a small improvement. Marco Bischoff halfway around the lap, he's found a few tenths. Walsingham not too far behind. Noah Eder, though, continuing to find time on his lap. And he could very much be competing to try to get up towards the front end of this grid. Fantastic lap time, though, from Smolia. That is an absolutely titanic effort there from the number 6 car, and is going to be so, so difficult to beat. Noah Eder, though, it won't be good enough to snatch away pole position, but he's certainly putting a good effort to try to get up towards the front row of the K Kramer Esports car. Does go up to second place. 0.2 of drift of our lead Honda for the time being. Marco Bischoff, his teammate, rounding out a lap of his own, 0.4 up. It does look like Bischoff doesn't quite have the same level of pace as his teammate. Unusual from the defending champion. We saw them quite close to one another at times, but usually, I think if not always, went in favour of the man we're on board with at the moment, the number 1 car. It is going to be an improvement, though, for Bischoff, and he slots in behind his teammate, all by only 0.04 of a second, but that is going to be no more efforts there from him. What can McCormack do? He's found 0.4 of a second, trying to see if he can displace that Porsche on the front row. It's not good enough, I don't think, to contend with the likes of Smolia, who is continuing to find time. The Aston Martin, 0.05 of a second adrift of the number 6, who is still going quickly. That time Barrier, he's got a long way on this lap to go, and he's already found half a second, so do not count out the Frenchman. We saw how quick he was last season in the Ferrari, making the switch over to the Aston Martin for the time being. Smolia did complete his lap. He did go faster, only by a couple of hundredths in the end, but Valentine Barrier, I think he lost a bit of time there through the chicane, so he's not going to be able to shuffle up the order all too much. Meanwhile, Philip Menard is half a second up, so that could be a very handy lap time there from the South African going into the last couple of corners into Ravazza. Using all that Mercedes torque to power his way out and towards the line. He's continued to find time on this lap. So this is Menard trying to see if he can break his way into the top 10. I think he will around maybe P8, depending on how he does. Oh, P6! So he gained a little bit of extra momentum. Fantastic exit out of the final corner then for the Mercedes. And that is qualifying over and done with then. So brilliant stuff from our drivers to bring that one to a close, as we get a little bit of a sneak peek there, because we certainly do have rain once again appearing for the race, which is going to be very exciting for us to see how all of our drivers get on. But Smolia then taking a fantastic pole position and doing everything that he needs to do, try and put himself in contention for a race victory in the season opener of Season 8. We will work our way through the grid in just a moment as everything updates. Just letting those results come through. But what an absolutely brilliant qualifying section to see. The drivers were continuing to find time every single lap that they went around, but in the end, it was the number 6 Honda that managed to snatch pole position with a fantastic effort in that car and put together a brilliant lap ahead of this man, Noah Ida, that lines up on the front row and unusually ahead of his teammate. So brilliant effort there from Noah Ida. Darren McCormack in the Aston Martin showed good pace throughout that qualifying session, but only good enough for P3 in the end. Marco Bischoff, defending champion, had to settle for P4, but that's still a strong position for him. Started in Maciej Malinowski, returning to the championship and starting in P5 for this race. So good stuff from him. Philip Menard in the Mercedes, a surprise last effort there from him. Timed his run when the track was at its best and really shined out the end there. That's a car that can deal with the curves very, very nicely and could be surprisingly competitive. Robbie Stapleford lines up in P7, and then Jardier in the number 4 Honda manages to get himself up into P8 with close friend Valentine Barrier starting just behind in P9. He was on such a good lap, but just could not quite bring it to a close out of the end there. Got it all upset through the very empty outer chicane, and that lost him time. Grantis Korekis rounds out the top 10 with Joris Appel starting just behind in the number 8 Audi. And there will be Isaac Price in that very nice looking G2 Esports Racing M4. He will start in P12 with George Boothby down in P13, but the Ferrari definitely will be, I think, a little bit of a struggle. Maybe better in the race pace aspects, but one lap pace not suiting that car so much. Then Walsingham starting in 14th with Romano Berenic starting in P15, just behind him with Sasha Vassner in the number 15 Audi starting in 16th place. Then we have Dario Iamolo in the number 29 Aston Martin. Good pace from him. Will start in P17 with Eric Dalfanta finding himself a little bit further down the order than perhaps he would have wanted, maybe getting acquainted with the M4, obviously switching from the Audi last season, of course, and had some good success in that car, but taking a little bit of time to get acclimatised to the M4. Sammy Fock and Luke Addison rounding out the top 20. With Addison, another one of our drivers changing cars. He has gone for the Honda as well. We have Boris Garafulin in the number 20 car with Vasily Anuferev starting in 22nd position, just behind. And then Robin Schaefer, another one of the LFM team cars. The Audi starting in 23rd position. The Audis may be struggling a little bit in these rainy conditions. Hugo Merles, the Frenchman, starting down in 24th, with Nico Peninen returning in the M4 once again to start down in 25th. Thomas Morant will start in 26th position, in the 21 car. Benjamin Langer in the number 30 Porsche will start in 27th place. You see all of those windscreen wipers flapping rather erratically, obviously preparing themselves for these rainy conditions. Mark Gavina in 28th with Hugo Boucher in the 26th BMW, followed up by Konstantin Soldatov rounding out the top 30. And then a new name for this top split. We have Lohan Vanden Einde. I hope I haven't butchered that one too badly. He starts in 31st position. We then have Arsion Manisha in 32nd spot, with Brugge Major, who switches over from the Porsche to the Honda as well. Another one of our new Hondas on the grid. Christian Lozanov in the number 24 Audi will start down in 34th position, and then rounding out the order is the full course yellow Maximilian Detchik in the Mercedes will bring a close to our grid as they all start to look to get underway on the formation lap and prepare themselves for 60 minutes of racing. And look at those weather conditions. We have a drying track on our hand, and around the pit window mark we are going to apparently be switching over to dry running conditions. So that gives us very exciting prospects. How will the drivers try to deal with all of that? How have they set their cars up to deal with that as well? So exciting prospects very much for this race. As let's get the timing board nicely prepared for each of our cars before they get underway with this racing, because I imagine that we are going to have action in absolute bucket loads, so need to make sure that all of that stuff is prepared and sorted before we dive into this one. But Alexander Smolia then, brilliant lap to get himself up into pole position. Now the question is, can he convert it? Was he just strong in the wet conditions, or will he be able to maintain it as we move over to this transition period? Is that going to allow the likes of the Aston Martins, the Ferraris, cars that are very typically suited to these changeable conditions and able to cope with both of them quite nicely and hold on to their tyres a bit better as well? That might start to bring the likes of George Boothby, Darren McCormack, Valentine Barrett, all of those drivers into a bit more contention. We'll have to wait and see as everyone starts to gather more closely together then for what is undoubtedly going to be a fantastic bit of action for the season opener of Season 8 in the LFM Pro Series. Everyone getting lined up then as they prepare themselves for what is going to be a tricky race in these conditions. I just want to say thank you everybody so much for the support in the chat and on the channel in general. I think we are going to be heavily rewarded with some fantastic action as the tension building then for Smolia. Can he convert that pole position start into a lead at the beginning of this race? He has Noah Ida lining up alongside him with the defending champion just behind. As we wait for green lights to head underway, I think it will be as we approach this next white line. It's a little bit away from the normal finish line, and there we go. And everyone's starting to squirrel away from the line. Malinowski breaking up into the middle of the pack as they all head down towards turn one for the very first time. It's a good start, though, for Noah Ida as they head in towards the first lap. Smolia dropping well back away in towards turn one. So Alexander Smolia has not managed to get away well at all. It's Noah Ida that leads, Bischoff just behind, and everyone trying to group up behind. See, oh, it's got loads of cars squirreling in the background. Is Smolia on dry tyres? Because he is absolutely plummeting down the order. The number 6 Honda able to keep up no pace whatsoever. And he's already off the circuit into the gravel. That's getting very, very busy further down the order. But Smolia then, I think, maybe has taken a big gamble on the strategy. His potential contact in towards Tosa Corner there. But just about everybody managing to maintain. Oh, is there further contact further? Who was that sent into the wall? Side covered by the graphics. I think that might be Luke Anderson that was sent into the wall on the right hand side. But Smolia then, disastrous start for him, and maybe not the right call. He's hoping that this rain disappears very quickly as it's getting increasingly busy further down the order. But everyone managing to stay just about with it for the time being. Noah Ida, Marco Bischoff and Malinowski all in the Porsches have disappeared outside the front. Philip Menard, great start from him up in towards P4. Now under pressure from Darren McCormack and Robbie Stapleford is getting very, very busy between those two into the chicane for the very first time. Menard escapes these two. He's got allowed a little bit of breathing space in a drag race between the BMW and the Aston Martin down in towards the penultimate corner. And is he able to make a move? It's getting very busy between other cars just behind. Oh, and the Aston Martin has done McCormack. Big mistake from him. and he has immediately then dropped several positions on the back of that, so big mistake there from the number 28 car, as he's continued to lose tons of positions and drops down the order. So disaster there for the man that started P3 on the grid. Meanwhile, we've got Valentine Barrier and, that's Garantus Correcus and Isaac Price going side by side. The BMW M4 trying to go around the outside in towards turn 1. He does make it stick. Meanwhile, in the background, that is McCormack and George Boothbeers. That's another mistake from the Irishman. He skips turn 2 and he's going to lose positions as a result. Manages to almost safely rejoin, sent into the gravel. Everyone else keeping it pointing in a straight line, but disaster then for 2 of our drivers that were at the pointy end of the grid, and they are really struggling in these early conditions. We've got suggestions as to whether or not these guys are on dry tyres or if they are on just tyres that are operating well outside of their optimal window. That'll transition, or as there's further contact at turn 7. That was Imola that was getting a little bit busy. Meanwhile, Sasha Vasta trying to go up the around the outside, of his LFM teammate Robin Schaefer as they head up towards Piratella. It's Robin Schaefer that comes out on top in all of that. Now Vasta under pressure from the Ferrari of Samir Fock on the run towards the Aqua Minerale. Series of corners there, just about managing to hold on to that. Meanwhile, McCormack now down all the way to P19. Where on earth Smollier has gone into the pit, so whatever Alexander Smollier did with his tyres and setup was absolutely disastrous. So the pole man completely unable to convert that. Meanwhile, we have a yellow flag out for the 33 car. What has happened there to Maidra? Oh, he's lost it there by the looks of it through Aqua Minerale. Tricky corner, and the Honda... Oops, as I've just pulled the video... Oh dear. That's certainly not what I wanted to do. Apologies for that, everybody. Yeah, that is a big issue there for him to have to contend with. Meanwhile, further up the order, though, it is the likes of Eric Del Fanta, Thomas Morant, and Gareth Fullen that are all in a battle of their own. Robbie Stapleford was the fastest driver last time around, but those Porsches really streaking away in the early portion of this race. We've got Soldatov and Hugo Merles swapping positions down the back straight, and it is the number 13 car that comes out on top of all of that. I do want to check in though with Robbie Stapleford, who really seems to be on it right now in the BMW M4. Conditions that this car is contending with quite nicely, and he is able to gain on these guys. As it stands, Philip Menard got off to a brilliant start, but has been quickly reeled in by the BMW. Malnowski has really hunted down towards the back of Bischoff, so we can very much have a three-way fight for the lead in just a moment. There are so many drivers that are close to one another. Some of them are Langer, and that is Gareth Fullen that were going side by side towards Piratella. Then you got Darren McCormack just hunting around just behind Benjamin Langer, trying to see if he can now go around the outside of the Honda. It's a brave move. He does pull it off. Brilliant stuff. Although he's gone wide, though, on the exit of turn 12. Has to avoid those sausage curves. Big jump on the rejoin. Just about managing to keep it out of anyone else's way, but losing several positions as a result. So, unfortunate stuff there for Langer, who continues to drop positions to some of the other cars. That's Luke Addison, I think, trying to recover. Has to go very, very wide on the exit of the final chicane, as we've got Soldatov and Boucher battling hard between those two drivers. Langer also now trying to dive towards the inside once again, and he does make the move stick on Anderson, who's now under pressure from the number 32 Ferrari as well, as Isaac Price has come into the pits. So another driver that's come into the pits very, very early. The G2 Esports that was up towards the pointy end of the grid, now dropping down the order with that pit stop. Robin Schaefer trying to go down the inside of Nico Peninen, who's had an extraordinary start, I think, and has managed to get in front of the number 5 Audi, who's now trying to see if he can find a way down in towards turn 5, but unable to do so, and the M4 does stay ahead for the time being. But everyone managing to just about keep it together for the time being. And unfortunately, I have no way of telling exactly what tyres some of these drivers were on, but Smollier did just seem to absolutely plummet down the order as we get a warning out for Peninen. Nothing seems to happen too much with him, but we've got a three-way tussle between Schaefer, Vassner and Samir Fock, all battling for the P15 position. as last time around, actually, Giardier was the fastest car on circuit. So these drivers all really trying to explore the track limits and really topping and changing with who is fastest on circuit. But no one actually able to make too many overtakes for the time being. But yeah, I am extremely unsure as to what the issue was with Smollett, because I agree, it does seem unlikely that he would have gone for dry tyres when there was so much wet running. As meanwhile, that's Giardier getting past Philippe Menard in the final parts of the circuit into the penultimate corner. So let's have a look and see. Oh, actually, no, I'll stay on board with this battle because I think Menard is going to try to make a run back to try to squeeze towards the left-hand side of the track. Mercedes desperately trying to keep his foot in it on the run towards the turn one. Mercedes unable to find a way past, and he does stay behind, but Giardier then able to find a spot and go up in towards the top 5, and Honda then sets his sights off into that top 3 battle that is getting once again pretty cozy. Malinowski putting all sorts of pressure onto our defending champion in P2 with his teammate right now with the advantage, who was fastest last time around. So Noah Ida doing a brilliant job in these wet conditions. But as far as the likes of McCormack, who had a disastrous opener to the lap, is getting worse. Soldatov has managed to get past, as has Hugo Boucher. And now he's under pressure from Hugo Mellers just behind, who's trying to dive towards the inside, in towards Tosa Corner. McCormack does respect it, gives him a little bit of room. Can the Ferrari keep his nose there on the run up towards the next corner? I see drag race between these two. I think the Aston Martin's got it, though. In actual fact, it's Manisha in the Audi trying to put pressure onto Hugo Mellers up in towards Piratella, unable to do anything on the entry. Can he get a cutback on the exit, though? Looking very, very competitive is that Audi right now. He's got a face for the Aston Martin in the gearbox, who's all over the back of this Ferrari. Goes wide, though, on the entry towards turn 12 there, and now is under pressure from the car behind. Just up ahead, you've got Soldatov and Hugo Boucher around the outside. He can't pull it off. Soldatov has to bail out on the chicane there. Meanwhile, Luke Addison getting a little bit busy around Mark Gavina in the Aston Martin, as Benjamin Langer getting involved in this one as well. These drivers were very busy not too long ago, and it's continuing all the way down towards the run into turn 17. The Honda defending the inside, but it's Benjamin Langer trying to slot down the inside of the Aston Martin, as Lowen in the Ferrari trying to see if he can capitalise on this as well. I think Langer has got the job done, as they've got Detchik hunting around just behind as well. And you can see that Mercedes looking very, very quick. So let's go on board with that Mercedes on the run down towards turn 1. You can see Langer has lost a huge amount of straight line speed on the run down towards that corner, trying to fight back on the entry to the braking zone, and contact, I think, between himself and Gavina, just about managing to all keep it pointing in the same direction. But they've just kept it pointing in a straight line for the time being. As further up the order, who is that who we've got battling side by side? That was Manisha. Oh, that's Hugo Merlin's big mistake from him, wide on the exit of turn 3 there. Turn 4, excuse me, and he ends up losing a position to Luke Addison. Meanwhile, we've also got a 3-way tussle for P18, I think that is. Between P17, excuse me, we've got Samuel Fock followed by Anuferev, Thomas Morant and Eric Dalfanza. So it's a 4-way fight for this P17 spot. So these drivers are all getting busy here. See a request for the number 11. So that's Romano Berenic on the exit of the Variante outer chicane, putting all sorts of pressure onto Dario just in front. Actual fact, may have set himself up for a nice run. Can he sneak down the inside, heading in towards the penultimate corner? Hasn't got the confidence on the brakes. Oh, I thought he was going to get a face full of Aston Martin on the entry there, but just about manages to keep it together, so it can't do anything for the time being, though. Meanwhile, Nuferev defending hard from Thomas Morant, who got very squirrely on the entry towards turn 17 there, just about managing to keep that one in a straight line. Meanwhile, Pennanen has lost a position, I do believe, to Robin Schaefer. May be able to fight back, though, on the run down towards turn 1 then. Can he do anything about the Audi in front? See the spray being kicked off. 10 minutes so time is when the rain will stop, so these drivers will all be preparing themselves for those changing conditions. Pennanen, though, sets himself up nicely through the next sequence of corners. I don't think he's going to be able to do anything for the time being, though. I do just want to check back with this battle between Manisha and McCormack. as Venetia all over those curves and sent off into the gravel, almost rejoins into the side of Addison. He's going to lose a position to Merles as well. Maybe even Mark Gavina can capitalise on this. So it all goes wrong for Venetia in the Audi. And that is just how quickly Imola can bite you in these, especially in these tricky conditions. Gavina wide on the exit, maybe leaves himself vulnerable for Venetia to come back, going in towards Tosa corner. As the Lowen, that's in the Ferrari, trying to sneak up the inside of Langer as well. With all of that bunching, I think the Audi has managed to reclaim the position. The Ferrari unable to do anything for the time being about the cars just in front of him. The top three have spread out a little bit more from where they were before. Meanwhile, the gap that has remained firmly closed is that between the number 11 and Imola in the 29 Aston Martin, just ahead of the Porsche. Don't think has quite got the straight line speed right now to compete with the Aston. It's a very, very quick car and it's nicely suited here as well. But yeah, I would love to, hopefully if we can get some drivers interested in a post-race interview, I would love to know from Smolia and Darren McCormack what on earth happened at the start of the race, because both of them plummeted down the order and has had a torrid time. McCormack hasn't pitted, Smolia has. He did the fastest lap of the race, so he's definitely got some pace in that car. As meanwhile, Luke Addison sneaking down the inside of McCormack, whose day goes from bad to worse, and now he's lost momentum on the exit, and he's being put under a lot of pressure from the Ferrari of Hugo Merles, the Frenchman, trying to see if he can close up the back of the Aston Martin. Look how fast that Aston is on this back stretch, so unable to do anything about that car for the time being, nor under brakes. He's got to be careful though about the Audi behind. We get a lovely shot on the dive bomb from Mark Gavina, who goes flying up towards the inside of Venetia, who got compromised by that completely, and now he's under pressure from Benjamin Langer, who is now under pressure from the Ferrari of Lowen van der Einde, just behind the number 32, trying to sneak down towards the inside of turn 5, but he can't do anything there. As that's a Mercedes of Detchuk running slightly wide. Loznov trying to capitalise on the outside of that in towards Tosa. Can he get a run? It's so difficult to out-drag that Mercedes on the exit, but the Audi might be the car to do it. Detchuk, I think, has lost some momentum and he has lost a position as well. So the Mercedes making that mistake and it all causing him difficulties. As let's check in with this tussle for P18. We've got Samir Fokkers pulled away from this group as, what has happened to McCormack? McCormack's gone very, very wide through Aqua Minerale and has lost a ton of positions as a result. He might even lose another one to the Ferrari just behind. He doesn't. So what happened to the driver that started in P3? I believe P3 or 4 anyway. Let's see. So everything was fine as they came through Piratella and then down on the run towards turn 11 there. Does he go just too deep? He does. Catches a big slide and then catches the grass. Aquaplane's off on the exit. Does a good job. Oh, does a good job. So hold the front end of that car and make sure that it doesn't have too much of a spin as he came out of there. Meanwhile, I'm acutely aware that we do have a battle that is hotting up between the likes of Thomas Morant and Boris Garafullin down in towards turn 2. The Audi gets through. Can Delfanta capitalise as well? He's shown the grass on the exit. Soltov now gets a run on him, trying to go around the outside. Can he carry the momentum there? I think he will. And the BMW of Delfanta unable to find a way past in the end. In actual fact, loses a couple of positions as a result. Hugo Merles and Mark Gavina battling side by side again. The Aston Martin seemingly coming out on top in all of that. Another battle that we've got developing further up the order is Grantis Korekis in the number 7 Porsche, hunting down Philip Menard, who, as these rainy conditions have started to filter away, does seem to be struggling to see visibly the Mercedes pulling over to the right-hand side, trying to cool those tyres. And that is what all of these guys are going to have to start doing as the track dries out to keep them alive as long as possible. It'll be really interesting to see how they all start to deal with that. Oh, as last time around, Alexander Smolia, he has set the fastest lap of the race of 47.0, which is absolutely blistering pace. But last time he did a 150.8. So I think he's had some sort of moment on lap, and that our poleman is having a big issue. And unfortunately losing a huge amount of positions during the opening 15 minutes of this race. Someone's best guess is that McCormack has been distracted by a wasp. It's it's a possibility, because we know he is an absolutely stellar driver, and something about, same with Smolia, something about the opening part of this race has been disastrous for both of those guys, and they have plummeted down the order. Also, we still don't entirely know why it was that Isaac Price did such an early pit stop, so he seemingly had either some damage that he wanted to repair or something, but I really wouldn't have thought that he would have found it worth it. So issues for a lot of cars. Meanwhile, the Aston Martin of McCormack continuing to come under pressure with a dive bomb from Lozanov down the inside in towards turn 2, and I think the Audi has managed to make it stick. Lovely move from there, and McCormack's day goes from bad to worse. Detchik in the Mercedes trying to see if he can carry some momentum and make a move on the Aston Martin himself, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to just yet. He tries to show his nose down towards the inside. Turn 5 almost gets a Honda in his gearbox for good measure, but just about everyone keeping it contact free for the time being. It's the battle between Gareth Fullin and Thomas Morant continuing to rage on. The Audi coming out on top for the time being, and that number 20 Honda putting all sorts of pressure onto the Audi in front, who went a little bit wide on the exit, did lose a little bit of speed, but managed to stay in front for the time being. As, at some point, Karekas has managed to get the move done on Philip Menard, and Valentine Barrier is now the one putting pressure on the Aston Martin and trying to see if he can find his way past. Let's see how much grunt does the Aston Martin have, and I think it's a pretty hefty amount, gaining all the time in the slipstream. The Frenchman making a switch from the Ferrari, and he's trying to see if he can set himself up for a switchback perhaps in towards turn 2. Menard defends the inside, gets caught up over the curves, manages to keep it though and hold that middle of the track running. Can Valentine carry that momentum out of 4 and in towards 5? He's alongside the Aston Martin, good on the brakes, running side by side with the South African. Shuts the door on the apex. A lovely move from the number 10 car to get himself up in towards P7. So Menard continuing to lose positions and maybe put under pressure from Joris Appel momentarily. Meanwhile, someone that's really gaining some pace now, Maciej Malinowski, after dropping back up to a second away from Bischoff, did a 46.9 on the last lap, so he is absolutely flying, and the pole is only 0.3 of a second adrift of the defending champion. And in these drying conditions does seem to be finding some additional form, so that may be a battle that we have to keep a close eye on. Do also want to have a look though at Romano Berenic in the number 11. He has caught up to the back of Imola, who is also tailing not too far away from the Porsche of Walsingham, swapping that car over from last season, but doing generally quite well to adapt in these very tricky conditions at the moment. I think closer battle on circuit though for the time being might be this with Joris Appel and Philip Menard, and Menard goes a little bit deep in towards turn 17. That might be all the invitation that Appel needs. How much can he gain down the start-finish straight? See, taking different lines, trying to cool down their tyres. The pit window is open, so this will be a very interesting part of the race. Who will be the first of our drivers, we believe, to be the first to making a switch to dry tyres? Because I still can't believe. Oh, is Appel diving towards the inside turn 2. He came from very far back. Menard does give him room on the entry to the corner. The Audi will be left out on the wider part of turn 3 there, and the Mercedes does well to hold that position. Always what's happened further down the order, that is Walsingham that's lost a couple of positions as Imola has got past in that opening series of corners. Berenic now trying to sneak up towards the inside. He can't capitalise on that, and number 22 car does hold on to the position for the time being. But what's happened to Walsingham then? So Walsingham was coming under pressure from Aston Martin, which is absolutely blisteringly quick in a straight line, and Walsingham on the entry to that chicane. Oh, gets a little bit of a touch. It was the smallest of touches and was generally pretty clean. I thought there was going to be bigger contact than that, but no, generally speaking, that was pretty minute between the two of them. But he did, thankfully for him, manage to hold on to the position ahead of Romano just behind. Though he has got that Porsche all over his gearbox. I believe that is the driver, or the person in the chat that was supporting number 11 may have to double check me on this one. I do believe that is the Croatian flag, if I'm not mistaken. So it's great to see some representation from there. And Yeah, wonky exit for Walsingham there. That's allowed him to close up. I do just quickly need to check, though, with Appel, because he was very close back. And Manar, who goes wide once more through that series of corners. So I think we may have a couple of runs towards someone, actually. Potentially a battle for the race. Lee Marco Bischoff all over the back of his teammate as we have a three-way tussle going in towards turn 2. The three Porsches are really streaked away in the early phases of this race. Now all absolutely battling hammer and tong for the race victory potentially, and these are crucial moments. You see Robbie Stapleford in the background of the shot in a bit of a race of his own at the moment, as is Jardier in P4 and 5 respectively, but these two very, very close on circuit, so we must keep a close eye on that. And thank you for the confirmation on that front. I didn't want to commit to it too confidently because I wasn't too sure, but yeah, that's great. As Berenich really coming under some pressure from Robin Schaefer just behind the Audi. Can he set something up going in towards Tosa? Berenich wisely defending that inside line. Oh, is Pennin trying to sneak up the inside of Roman Schaefer. The Audi left the door open. The BMW wasn't able to make a move on the entry. Did compromise the exit of the Audi, though. You can see that's opened up a couple of car lengths to the Porsche of Berenich in front. As we get a white flag out for Boucher further down the order. Is he running slowly for some reason? I'm not sure. Seems to all be fairly okay for the time being, so I'm not sure what that was about. As meanwhile we've got Lozanov and Van der Nijnde going side by side. The Audi trying to see if he can out-drag the Ferrari out the hill, and he does. So the 24 holds on to that position for the time being. Isaac Price, one of our surprise early pitters, and it'd be really interesting to see what he does in this phase of the race, because bearing in mind he served a pit stop, but that doesn't count towards his mandatory pit stop total. It has to be in the pit window. So Isaac Price will still have a pit stop to make, but he is definitely looking like the faster driver of this trio, and putting all sorts of pressure as we've got swapping of positions. Oh, what was going on there? We looked like we had swapping of position between Manar and Appel for a second, but I think that may have just been a bit of a timing board error. Appel, though, hassling the back of the Mercedes, is getting very, very close with Berenich, Schaefer and Penninan once again. Walsingham able to hold the position. Penninan jumping the curb over the apex of turn 3 as Boucher comes into the pits further down the order. They all stay as they were, but the BMW able to close up onto the back of the Audi in front. You see now it's looking very dry for the remainder of the, or at least so there won't be any more rain down. It'll take some time for the circuit to dry, and all this time the tyres will be burning up and making these drivers' lives very, very difficult. Only one driver officially coming in to serve their pit stop. I imagine a lot of these will be leaving it as late as they dare to try and keep those slick tyres working as best they can, but these wet tyres will be screaming as they overheat, and there's not much surface water left on the track to try to cool them down. Meanwhile, though, Massier, the closest he has been in a very, very long time, we go on board the front splitter of Malowski, trying to find a way past the defending champion, and he looks towards the inside, and he has outbreak the number 1 car going in towards turn 17. Bischoff sent towards the exit curve. Massier trying to muscle his way through in towards turn 18. There's a drag race between the pair of them. No Reader streaks away in all of this, and Massier does get in front of the defending champion, who is sent onto the exit curve, and we finally have a swapping position between those two. Meanwhile, I think we may have had a swap between George Boothby and Dario Imola. The Aston Martin, I think, may have made a mistake on the exit of the 14-15 chicane, and that's allowed the Brit to fire his way up in towards the top 10, although could immediately come under pressure then if he's not careful from the Aston Martin behind. We know how fast that car is in a straight line. Another car comes into the pits. That is Penninan. See one of the other Ferraris coming out of the pit lanes there, so they are a lap down, I do believe. As who is that going side by side in the background? That is Robin Schaefer and Romano Berenich, with Robin Schaefer trying to put pressure onto the number 11 car, but unable to do so, and they stay as they were. Much like, Marco Bischoff has got a good exit by the looks of it out of Tosa, and trying to sneak up towards the inside of Piratella. I thought that was going to get a little bit spooky on the apex there, but Malowski left just about enough room. And Bischoff, very, very wise racecraft in the cockpit of that Porsche. And he knows that it is all about consistency in this championship. He wants to make it back-to-back titles. Meanwhile, Solder and Gareth Fullin battling very, very hard as we get faced with a tree. And the Honda having to slot in behind, but Del Fanta now in the M4 trying to see if he can fight the Honda up the hill, but I don't think he's got the horsepower. The Honda is just so good. Oh, that's a big mistake at the brakes. Oh, a disastrous contact between the Honda and Soldatov. Soldatov completely the innocent victim there. Boris, I think, waiting for Soldatov to get underway again. Maybe actually retiring to the pits. No, he does get going again, but oh, disaster between those two cars. Let's try and see if we can go on board with the Honda as they went up towards the hill. Do we hear a lockup under braking through the puddles, or did he just... Oh, he just completely outbrakes himself. That was... He did not react to when he needed to brake there, and that is very, very unfortunate there for Soldatov. So, devastating stuff in terms of his race, and the Honda, though, recovering eventually. Meanwhile, I do believe we've got battles going on between our front drivers again, as Bischoff and Massier battling hard. Oh, as Dario, oh, what's happened there? When George Buffy goes flying across the inside of turn 2. So Dario reclaims a position. Oh dear, so the Aston Martin managed to use its straight line speed to get down the inside, and the Ferrari just got caught up on the entry curb on the exit. He will argue that he wasn't left enough room there. A little bit almost Verstappen-esque with a certain entry with moving into that braking zone there. So Ferrari coming out not very well in that, so dropping down to P11. Meanwhile, we've got Isaac Price slotting down the inside on a much cleaner overtake in front on Lozanov in towards turn 2 as we make our way almost towards the halfway point of this race. And these drivers have got just over 10 minutes left of the pit window to try to see when are they going to time it. You can see visibly there's still surface water out there on circuit, but it's definitely drying up, and these tyres are going to be screaming, but they need to try to call it for when these dry tyres are going to work, otherwise it can get very tricky. More drivers coming into the pit, so to try to bite the bullet on it and maybe do something a bit different. Meanwhile, Bischoff has not been able to close back in for a potential overtaking. He's very much putting pressure onto Malinowski. Different lines between those two drivers. That's Massier going slightly offline there to try to cool down those tyres. And gives him a slightly longer run down towards turn 2, but easily enough to hold the position for the time being. This has allowed, though, Noah Eder to stretch a lead to 3 seconds, so he is loving the fact that these two are battling. But Marco Bischoff looking extremely racy on the exit of turn 4 there, but unable to do anything about the number 18 car just in front of him. As Anufriev, another one of our drivers, to come into the pits then. As this is our closest battle on circuit, the battle for P2 position. They were the other way around for a long time. Oh, what is that going on further down the order? I think that could be a lap down, potentially. Yeah, that is. That was Morant and Boucher going side by side on the exit of Tosa in the background. And the BMW coming out on top in all of that. So it gets a little bit tricky to navigate at some points in this race at the moment, because we have drivers that are, some are a lap down, some are on the lead lap, but these two battling out hard for the 31st and 2nd positions, with the BMW coming out on top for the time being. Meanwhile, just go on board with Marco Bischoff, last season's champion, looking obviously to try to defend his title, but does not seem to have the outright race pace as it stands at the moment, but still plenty of opportunities in the second half of this race to try to convert the season opener into a race win. And Noah Eder then, this is crucial. Noah Eder has decided it is time to come into the pits then, and that could be very telling for how this race plays out. I'm not 100% sure that that's the right call. It could be tricky to get those tyres up to temperature, and he may end up wearing them out, but these other drivers staying out there for the time being. K Kramer Racing esports drivers, imagine, I'm not sure if they are in a chat at all, but taking certainly different strategies at the moment. Marco continuing to put pressure on Massier, who's forced to defend towards turn 5 then. But Bischoff unable to do anything for the time being and has to continue to settle for P3, as we've got a swap of positions between the likes of Walsingham and Robin Schaefer. But Walsingham got a great line out of turn 2 and 3 and trying to see now if he can reclaim that position on the run up towards turn 5. But he can't for the time being. In actual fact, he's going to be wary of Berenic in the number 11 car just behind him. although it will spread out a little bit as they head through that next series of corners. Another battle we've got hotting up is Mark Gavina. Oh, we've got a big sideways moment coming out through those series of corners. Huge slide on the exit of turn 3 there. Just about managed to keep it all together, but that got very, very tricky for the Aston Martin as Noah Ida is emerging from the pits. Crucially comes out in clean air. So that will be absolutely critical for this early pit stop. Presumably swapping onto the dry tyres now as the track does swap over to greasy conditions officially from damp. We'll have to see what his pace is like. He's got to be careful not to push too hard, too early. Meanwhile, Marco Bischoff lost some time there, and now he comes into the pits. So this will be interesting between himself and Noah Ida, his teammate. I imagine that Noah should still be able to come out quite far in front. He did have a healthy lead over his German compatriot, but Massier deciding to stay out for the time being. He has got a little bit of traffic in front of him. He'll be hoping that doesn't cause him too much of an issue, but these are very interesting times for strategy in this one. Walsingham has not let go of trying to reclaim that position from Robin Schaefer, who I think is one of our few drivers with a windscreen wiper still on at the moment. George Boothby getting a little bit of traffic from Lozanov. I believe that is just up ahead. But you can see that Audi able to pull away down that start-finish straight. The Porsche looking very much like the before the last BOP around here. Just does not seem to have fantastic straight-line speed, and flashing of the lights there from Walsingham. Obviously wanting Lozanov in that Audi to get out of the way pretty swiftly to not lose any time, and the Audi very much obliges, and number 22 car is able to get through without too much of an issue. Bischoff, though, leaving the pit lane. Whereabouts is Noah Ida in all of this? He is coming down the start-finish straight there. Will we see his teammate emerging out in front of him? And Noah Ida is going to have the momentum, though, to go blindingly quick past the other K. Kramer Racing Esports car and maintains the effective lead. But it does look like that gap may have come down, and that is potentially costly for, or actually no, could be working in Massier's favour. I was trying to work out which way it would end up going. As Joris Appel, he is just coming out of the pits now. But I think this could work in favour of Malinowski. See what his lap is as he hits a timing beam. There's a 46.7 on that lap. What was it for Noah Ida? As it will take another lap actually. By the looks, he must have invalidated, I think, his last lap, because he's definitely done one extra lap than his teammate, but both showing up as effectively their out laps, I think. Either that or they're very similar in lap and out lap times, so we'll have to wait and see maybe officially what that will be. Dario Imola has come into the pits further up the order. Meanwhile, we've got Robin Schaefer trying to make a move on George Boothby. He seems to be really loving these conditions as they dry out. He may have a windscreen wiper on at the moment, but certainly dealing with the drier track. You see visibly that line getting drier. You can see the separation between the dry patch of the tarmac and the slightly darkened areas where the damp is still in effect. Those curbs, though, will still be slippery. Robin Schaefer, does he think about a move towards Tosa? Shows his nose. George Boothby outbrakes himself a little bit. We get a face full of tree again, but the Ferrari does hold on to the position for the time being. And also want to say a huge thanks to our mods taking care of those bots in the chat, rather unwanted visitors, but they do seem to love sim racing. I still haven't quite narrowed down why, but they do make an appearance very often. Robin Schaefer does go into the back of George Boothby, outbrakes himself, flashing of the lights there. That's not going to do too much good because George Boothby was behind him at the time, but George Boothby goes wide on the exit of Aqua Minerale then, and I think those flashing of lights was Robin Schaefer apologising, the Ferrari doing the same as probably as an appreciation. But yeah, that was unfortunate contact between the pair of them. Now Massier further up the order, he has come into the pits. The likes of Jardier have come into the pits as well. Stapleford stays out, so interesting stuff there as Robin Schaefer trying to go around the outside of George Boothby once more. As he's left not much room to work with. They might have apologised to each other, but the Ferrari certainly showing him a squeeze on the exit there. Do any of them come into the pits? That is Walsingham just behind that comes into the pits then, but these two staying out for the time being. But I imagine that is going to be a very quick Audi heading down towards turn 1, slotting into the slipstream for the time being. That's one of the Hondas appearing He switches back towards the inside, but is unable to outbrake the Ferrari for the time being. Now I do need to check whereabouts is the likes of Noah Ida and Marco Bischoff. There's a second separating the pair of them at the moment. And Massier has got underway. Massier is, unless I'm mistaken, I think Massier is going to be miles in front of these two. Oh, it's actually a little bit of a further run to the pit lane. So it's a little bit closer than I was thinking it was going to be for a moment. So let's hop on board then. Noah Ida, has he managed to reclaim the lead? Massier right at the end of the pit lane now. You can see there's the white Porsche. The German coming charging down the start-finish straight. Massier, does he try to defend the inside line? He does. Noah Ida diving towards the outside. And he does get the move under brakes. And Massier holds on to P2 then. But crucially, he is very close to the back of the German car. And now we have the K Kramer Racing Esports sandwich between these drivers. And it all gets very, very busy at the top end of the field. But crucially, those two red Porsches that you see, their tyres will be a little bit more in the working window, but that is not stopping Massier, already trying to mount up a charge for the race victory. Marco Bischoff trying to sneak around the outside. We've got swapping of positions between Vassner and Walsingham further down the order, but I can't take my eyes away from this battle. But Massier unable to make a move on Noah Ida for the time being, but has he got those tyres in a better window? I think Bischoff knows that this is potentially a crucial moment to try to get a move done on Malinowski. He lost a position to the pole earlier on, only a few laps before the pit stop. Massier taking a slightly different line there through Aqua Minerale, but them all remaining fairly even. Noah Ida now starting to pull away just a little bit ahead of those two behind, and he'll be hoping that he's able to open up a gap like he did earlier on in the race with these two scrapping. It was a nice run there through that final that exit of Variante Alta, now firmly locked into the slipstream of Malinowski, who's trying to squeeze the German towards the inside. He's got to be careful on the brakes, and he may have overdone it, as now the K Kramer Racing Esports car does reclaim the position, and Massier does drop down to P2. Car lengths opening up between Noah Ida then and Marco Bischoff, but now Massier already back hard on the attack, trying to see if he can get back past the German, and he's got the run down this start-finish straight. Noah Ida will be loving this, as they've got more cars appearing out of the pit lane. I think that's Robbie Staplefoot in all of that, so he will be hoping these cars continue to battle. Massier down the inside, though. Can he reclaim the position? And he does! Brilliant stuff between these two, scrapping it out. But Robbie Staplefoot now, the dark horse in all of this. I said that I think they needed to stay out a bit longer. It worked for Malinowski, and it's worked for Staplefoot, and he could be in a very interesting position to try to challenge for these guys, because he was a bit far adrift previously. It was Jardier in the Honda that we saw appearing previously out of the pit lane. He is a bit further drift of this battle, but now we have a bit almost a four-way tussle for the lead. But Noah Ida then is your current race leader, ahead of Malinowski, Marco Bischoff, and now Robbie Staplefoot, the Brit of the G2 Esports racing team, finding his way up into a potentially more challenging spot. Meanwhile, Romano Berenic, fastest lap of the race last time around, absolutely flying in these conditions. Number 11 car, 45.5. He was almost a second clear of anybody. That was absolutely remarkable pace from number 11 car, and he's trying to put pressure onto George Boothby. Pit window is now closed, so that is the end of the pit stop phase. Romano Berenic really always has a huge wiggle. Quick hands from George Boothby then, trying to hold on to that one. And he does keep it barely pointing in a straight line. But Romano, very much the man on the move at the moment. Sasha Vassner is tucked in with this battle as well, as there may have been a bit of a swapping of position between Major and Lozanov, I think. Oh, it's that was a bit of a wonky line through that opening couple of corners. That's 5 and 6, excuse me, actually. But just about managing to keep it together. I think also Detching may have lost a position to Boris Garafulin in all of that. And fastest lap ends up being taken away from Berenic and goes to this man, Massier, who has gone an absolutely lightning exit out of 3 and 4. Can he think about making a move up towards the inside of turn 5? He thinks about it, no reader. He half closes the door. Has to react to it though, and now that lead that he was extending has immediately been shut down by the man that started in... Actually, I'm trying to remember where Massier started. He was certainly at the pointy end of the field. I can't remember exactly where he was, but he certainly found his way up to P2, and is putting Noah Ida under all sorts of pressure. who half defends the inside line again, showing his nose. This is allowing Bischoff to closing in. Oh, that's a huge run from Malnoski, and he flies into the lead. Fantastic comeback, a mistake there from Noah Reader through Piratella. Wiggle on the entry to the braking zone for Aqua Minerale for Malnoski, but it's good enough to see himself lead this race for the first time after 40 minutes of action. And now can the pole in these drying conditions streak away from the man that has led this race for so long. Marco Bischoff, he'll be looking to see if he can make his way up in towards P2, but he potentially has that BMW looming just behind and may not be able to make the attack on his German teammate as much as he would like. You can see Jardier not too far back from this group, but what a move there from Malinowski, timing it to perfection, putting the pressure on when he needed to. He's been working his way into form as the track has dried out during this entire race, and he finally puts it all together and finds his way in towards the lead. Meanwhile, fastest lap of the race now actually goes towards Isaac Price, a 44.555 from the Brits. A difficult day so far for him, but still very much being competitive. Meanwhile, we've got Delfanta and Samir Fock. I think Samir has had a big moment through the chicane there. Ferrari, I think somebody else said Ferrari doing Ferrari things, and so I think that was slightly unrelated to this, but unfortunately it's exactly what happened to Samir then, just doing very poorly over the chicane. Meanwhile, what we've got going there between Berenic and Vassner, who's trying to move all the way around the outside, the Audi trying to out-drag the Porsche down towards turn 2, and he does. Brilliant move there from Sasha Vassner to work his way up in towards 13th position. Did get a little bit of a compromised exit through that series of corners, but he does hold on to it for the time being. Meanwhile, Philippe Menard in the Mercedes becomes our new fastest man on track, 44.4 for the Mercedes driver. Currently sitting in P8, has Joris Appel not too far adrift of him, but looking very competitive at this stage of the race. All the gaps at the front of the pack have opened up quite nicely. Well, I say nicely, we would want them to be very close indeed for our entertainment. Meanwhile, I think Isaac Price has just made a move. Oh, it was a very deep dive, actually, through that series of corners. A bit of a block pass from the Brit in that G2 Esports BMW. But he does find his way ahead of the Ferrari. Darren McCormack now finding some pace and does a 44.3 to be the new fastest man on circuit. I said that those gaps were opening up. Tell a light, Marco Bischoff now trying to hunt down his teammate. You see Malinowski, though, almost 2 seconds clear. This could be a huge lap time potentially from Malinowski, because I think he is flying in these conditions. 43.9 from the number 18 car. Absolutely phenomenal pace from him. As Robbie Stapleford trying to find a move on Marco Bischoff, so this turns into a three-way fight for P2. Jardier will be rubbing his hands together, hoping that these two start to really battle hard. As Noah Reader, the man that led the race for so long, I think maybe has a car that is much more adapted for the dry conditions, the wet conditions and the dry, because he does seem to have lost pace substantially in this second phase of the race, whereas Malinowski was biding his time. As it seems the likes of Stapleford and Marco Bischoff were all in a far more comfortable window with their tyres and with how their car is driving at the moment to try to put the number 14 that has led so much of this race under pressure. You can see visibly Marco Bischoff locked onto the gearbox of his teammate. These two took the team's championship last time. Will certainly be putting in a strong effort to do the same. Oh, no, Reader makes a big mistake, though, on the entry to the braking zone. Almost clatters with Marco Bischoff, and now Stapleford trying to make his way through as there's a drag race between the pair of them up towards the chicane, and the BMW does get through. Number 27 car up onto the podium then, and Noah Reader, our race leader for so long, now drops down to P4, and in actual fact, he's going to have potentially a Honda of Jardier for company very soon. So disappointment there for the number 14. Meanwhile, further down the order, Romano Berenic still putting pressure onto Sasha Vassner. The number 15 Audi. Good straight line speed in that car, but just hasn't quite been able to streak away from the Porsche that's looking more competitive in these tight and twisty sections, although does clatter the curbs there and has a difficult line. Do need to check in, though, with the likes of Jardier and Noah Eder, because look at these two firing their way down towards turn 1. Look at the speed advantage of this Honda. I don't think it'll be close enough this time around. But he is certainly looking very racy at this point in the race. Man that finished P2 in the standings last season will be hoping to go to one better. I think he'll be fairly pleased with how the sort of result he's on track for today, because the Honda Definitely a competitive car this season, there's no doubt about it, but I don't think Imola is its strongest circuit, so if he can come away with a solid result here, he can carry that momentum forward into the races to come. Meanwhile, Stapleford now actually looking like the driver really on the move, although last time around it was Jardier who did the fastest lap of the race, so 43.5. So the Yassi guys at the top of the grid, looking very, very speedy in this phase of the race. You can see Stapleford continuing to gain on the Porsche of Bischoff around this lap, although it does go a bit back and forth. That's an area of the circuit that Porsche really starts to shine. So agile and so good under acceleration, and not allowing the BMW to close up, and a difficult line there for Stapleford through there. That'll give Marco Bischoff a little bit of breathing space for the time being. Someone that can't say the same is Penningham, that's coming under increasing pressure from Boothby. I have to say, Penningham's been a bit of a silent one in all of this. I think he started well outside the top 20 if I remember, so great stuff from him. Luke Addison and Isaac Price, I think, were just going side by side. That was Isaac Price trying to go around the outside in towards Tosa corner, but he wasn't able to make it stick, and the number 17 Honda did hold on to that position. He's continuing to come under pressures over G2 Esports driver, trying now to go around the outside in towards Aqua Minerale. That's a very difficult move to make stick. Romano Berednic tried doing that earlier, and he came off a lot worse, losing several positions in the process. But that BMW looking very feisty at this phase of the race. And we'll have to jump up the order though, because another BMW and his teammate Robbie Stapleford 0.2 of a second away from Marco Bischoff. As we enter the final 12 minutes of this race, Massier continuing to pull away from these guys at 43.1 last time around. He is loving these conditions and continuing to find time. Meanwhile, Penningham and George Boothby, I think, have just swapped around. George Boothby trying to go around the outside of the thin in towards turn 2. Lovely move. Completely cleared the BMW driver on the brakes there, and sees himself get up into P11. Penningham hasn't entirely let go of this one, although Stapleford, look how close to the back of Marco Bischoff he is, going through Aqua Minerale. Such a tight and difficult section to follow through. We'll stay on board with him as they head up towards 14 and 15. You see Stapleford showing his nose, just trying to put Bischoff under pressure, but we know that the German, we know how good and calm he is under pressure. The racecraft in the cockpit of that Porsche is very, very high, but Stapleford unable to do anything for the time being. Jardier's dropped back a little bit as well. Will the BMW, though, have the legs on the Porsches? Also, further down the order, Mark Gavina, 43.0, so he takes a new fastest lap of the race. I'm not sure if Massier will be about to snatch that away. I think he might do, and I think he might do it by an absurd amount as well. A 42.6 from Massier, who is absolutely flying. But now it's Stapleford trying to make a move to go up into P2 in this race. Marco Bischoff trying to hold onto it, defends the inside in towards turn 2. Can the BMW outbrake him around the outside? And he does! Fantastic move there from the 27 car. Can he hold onto it through his next series of corners? Natural fan Marco Bischoff got a compromised line there, and it's his teammate trying to maybe make a move up in towards turn 5 and 6, but he can't get alongside, and Stapleford then up in towards P2. Malnowski continues to extend his lead as these two battle, and it's brought Noah Ida and Jardier right into the mix. As George Boothby further down the order was actually the driver, then snatched away a new fastest lap, so it keeps on changing all the time. It's impressive though from the Ferrari to have such strong pace in this late stage in the race. I'm sure that Boothby would have been hoping he'd had that a little bit earlier, but this is our closest fight on circuit at the moment. Stapleford now will be hoping to try to eke away from Marco Bischoff. Good straight line speed in that BMW, although he did get a very compromised line actually, as he does defend the inside line. Actually, sorry, that was the Porsche of Bischoff trying to show his nose. Should know really by the BMW. It definitely sounds a lot different to the Porsche, much more dull engine tone when you go on board with that car, but Stapleford, you can see, opened up half second already, but it's Jardier now looking towards the inside. Noah Ida going into penultimate corner. The German force to the outside there. The Honda trying to keep on the inside in towards the final turn. Almost coming together, barely leaving each other enough room, but they get through cleanly. But now the Honda, the closest he has been in a long, long time. And here comes the Honda power down the start-finish straight, trying to see if he can close in on that Porsche, and he's gaining. He goes towards the outside. Can he outbrake him? Can he repeat what George Boothby did? Can he repeat what Stapleford did? And the answer is no. Noah Ida very good on the brakes there and able to keep the Honda behind for the time being, but I'm not sure that Janier's given up on this one just yet as we go on board, trying to force his way towards the inside. Noah Ida kept on moving to the left, but the Czech driver finds his way. But he's still not able to get past now, trying to line up a cutback on the exit of turn 6. This is brilliant stuff, heading in towards Tosa Curve now. Janier on the outside, Noah Ida, face full of tree again. Porsche squeezing him on the exit. Oh, and Janier onto the grass there. He won't be too happy with that one, flashing the lights, not keen on how the German defended there. But my goodness, that was some very hard side-by-side action. I don't think that is anywhere near done. Janier will be more determined than ever after that contact to reclaim the position. And Noah Ida has lost the toe now of his teammate ahead, which will make it more difficult for him to hold that spot. Janier so much more confident through Aqua Minerale, sending it all the way to that outside curb. That's usually a telltale sign of how confident you are in the rear end of that. And even the Honda, with how twitchy it is, doing very nice to keep with the Porsche, who again, looking very, very quick. And see, we've also got a battle hossing up further down the order between Vassner and Berenic and Peninen, but I do need to keep an eye on this one as Janier tried to see if he can make his way down towards the outside. He compromises the exit of Noah Ida, who still holds on for the time being. I have to take a quick flick across over to this battle, but I don't think anything's changing with that one anytime soon. They got very close, but it is Janier now that is trying to hunt down the Porsche, and he is far closer than he was before, almost squeezed towards the wall. It's like Schumacher and Barrichello at Hungary in 2010, almost going into the concrete, but Janier does get in front, and I don't think there's anything that Noah Ida can do to fight back. And the man that finished P2 in the standings last time around and has such a quiet race in the opening half finds his way up into P4 and manages to gain the position over the German that led this race for so long. The dry conditions has properly become dry now as Sasha Vassner right on the outside of the BMW of Peninen, trying to go around the outside of the number 34 car. Can't make it stick though, and the Finn holds on for the time being. And now it's brought Romano Berenic actually into all of this as well. Vassner continuing to show his nose, very weavy. Nothing against that, but showing, well, certainly giving the BMW a face full of mirrors, although he's having to look in his own now because Romano down the inside in towards turn 11. BMW going deep on the brakes, and they all stay as they were previously. Also do just want to make a quick note, last time around it was Stapleford that was 0.4 of a second faster than Malinowski, so brilliant pace from him at this stage in the race. Darren McCormack has fastest lap honours on a 41.3, looking very rapid. It's Romano trying to make a move in towards Aqua Minerale though, but he can't make it stick. Noah Ida has dropped a second away now from Janier, so has not been able to stick with the pace of the Honda once he found his way through. On board with number 11 though, filtering his way through the chicane. Haven't seen anyone fall victim of track limits just yet, so they haven't got much racing left to go, but they've all done a good job of handling that, because that is certainly tricky. Vassner though, down the inside, almost into the side of the BMW on the entry, just about keeps it putting in a straight line. The weight transfer catching out the Audi there, but he does make his way through, and now it's Peninen that is under all sorts of pressure potentially from the Porsche behind. I'm not sure though if Romano is going to have the legs on that car, on the BMW that we are currently on board with, to do anything about it. In actual fact, it's Peninen trying to maybe reclaim the position of Vassner, who doesn't defend the inside line, but the Audi does have enough grunt down the start-finish straight, and he maintains the position for the time being. A little bit of information there from one of our drivers, or one of our viewers, Sasha Vassner on 3 corner cuts, so he has to be very careful in the closing stages of the race to not get any more, because that could spell disaster for him. Up at the front, Stapleford has continued to reel in Malinowski, but the gap is 3.3 seconds, and there is not much time left of this race to go. Pole might have done just enough to keep that BMW behind, but very impressive stuff there from the G2 Esports car. And also interesting information, Bischoff has 2 cuts himself, so 3 then, so Bischoff is certainly flirting with the edges of track limits, as is Peninen, who jumps over the curbs on the exit Aqua Minerale. Who's that yellow flag for? The number 30 car, that is Langer, but we'll have to see what happened to him in a second. Peninen trying to hold off the hard-charging Porsche. He does for the time being. What happened though with, I think it was Benjamin Langer that fell victim somewhere in all of that. He was driving around by himself by the looks of it. Also, fastest lap honours now goes to Valentine Barrier, who will have to check in oh, that's a huge mistake there from Langer. Gets it completely wrong through 5 and 6. So disaster there for the German in number 30 car. And that allowed, I think it was Madra, to sneak his way past. As do want to check in on a couple of fights in just a second. I know we've got Solstov and Boucher going side by side. See what was going on with them not too long ago. It was down in towards the penultimate corner. Solstov down the inside of Hugo there, and managing to sneak his way through. Romano Berenic and Schaefer. Oh, that's an interesting... Yeah, Robin Schaefer then has managed to get past the Porsche of Berenic. So somehow in all of that... Yeah, Berenic in that opening series of corners. I don't know if we'll find it. There we go. So the number 11 car defending the inside down towards turn 1. Again, it's another Audi, one of the LFM team Audis. Oh, we get a bit of lag on the replay there. Apologies for that. The number 5 car made contact on the entry and held the position on the exit. I'm not sure if Berenic will be too happy about that one. He might have something to say about that post-race. It was also getting very close between the likes of Valentine Barrier and Grantas Carreras further up the order, but the Frenchman has now dropped back for the time being. Darren McCormack snatches back fastest lap honours, as whereabouts is Malinowski. So there will be 2 laps left of this race to go. Again, Stapleford, the faster of the two, another half a second. He would have been wanting this to be one of our 90-minute races, to maybe send a charge up towards a race win, because he has been absolutely flying in his phase of the race, as is the Aston Martin of Valentine, who again rolls up towards the back of Grantas Carreras, who have both closed in on Noah Ida, as has Jardier, who has not said goodbye to a podium. He has been flying over his last couple of laps, and maybe he will have a last-ditch attempt to try to snatch away a position from Marco Bischoff. And we've seen these two fight many a time last season. Might just have a little bit too much distance to cover, though. Still a couple of laps to try to make it happen. Del Fanta and Anufriev battling hard between these two further down the order. So that's Merles and Manisha, I think, may have had some sort of incident. Or was that leaderboard just having a bit of a concern? I think it was. Those two staying as they were, although again we've got Romano Berenic. We get the call for the fastest lap now, so there's not going to be too much of this action-packed race left to go. Berenic unable to do anything for the time being. Meanwhile, it's Grantas Carreras now that is on the move. Jardier, you can see, hunting around the back of Marco Bischoff further up, but he's a little bit too far adrift. But we may have a 3-way fight on our hands for the final place in the top 5. It's Carreras trying to see if he can hunt down Noah Ida, who has dropped down the order in the latter stages of this race. Such a shame for him. But beware of that Aston Martin. The Frenchman will be catching very quickly. Carreras does move towards the outside, close enough, but here comes Valentine, and it's almost 3 wide down in towards turn 1. Carreras trying to go around the outside of Noah Ida, and he's hung out to dry. Valentine trying to capitalise all of this. That turns into the outside of turn 4. Brilliant action there between them, but now he's boxed in behind Noah Ida, who switches to the inside line to defend from Carreras. Valentine trying to snatch his position away from Carreras. He's got the inside for turn 6. Grant has shown barely enough room on the exit there. He's got the inside towards Toe, so that's going to allow Noah Ida to escape. A little bit of contact, face for the tree again. And Valentine is sent wide on the exit of Tosa then, and Carreras holds on to the position. Meanwhile, Jardier all over the back of Marco Bischoff. Further up the order, we've got a yellow flag for Robin Schaefer. I'm not sure what has happened to him in all of that, but I do need to check in with some of these other battles. Valentine Barrier is alongside Grantas Carreras once more in towards Aquamilla Raleigh, trying to set up a switchback in towards turn 12. He can't make it stick. Carreras, though, wide on the exit, but he does hold on to it for the time being. Meanwhile, Jardier continuing to try to see if he can do anything about Marco Bischoff to snatch away that podium position. Massier further up the field, coming into the final corner now. We will watch him cross the line, but I do need to check in a little bit with this. Jarnier still behind for the time being, but it is Maciej Malinowski that takes the race win here in the season opener of Season 8 in the Pro Series. A fantastic setup and strategy by him. Sees him take the win. Robbie Stapleford finishes P2. Meanwhile, Valentine Barrier did take the position, and the very last death of the matter. What did he do? He managed to get out the inside into the penultimate corner. Granted, the Crackers showed the gravel on the exit, and the Aston Martin muscled his way past in towards P6 in the end. Stapleford takes an impressive P2. Great race pace in the latter stages from him. Bischoff holds on to P3 ahead of Jardier. He'll be pleased with that one. The Honda showing good form for him in the opening round. Noah Eder, after leading the race for so long, has to settle for P5. Berenic, who was in so many fights this race, unable to get past Penninan in the end. Same goes for Del Fanta and Anufriev. Further down the order, we've got Darren McCormack, who had a torrid time and is trying to see if he can out-drag that BMW towards the line. I think he's going to run out of space. Oh, it's going to be so close between the pair of them. The Aston Martin almost came good there at the end. Nothing separating the pair of them as they hit the timing beam, but it was Hugo Borchet in the BMW that maintained the position ahead of the Irishman, who had a very difficult time in that race. We still don't exactly know what happened that saw him fall down the order, but that was very unfortunate stuff. Someone that I imagine will be looking to make a far more competitive return as some more of our finishers hit the finish line. I do believe that Smolia actually left the server at some point, so still I would love to know what happened there for our pole man. Really did not feel like he was in the race very long in all of that because of the difficulties that he went through. But yeah, very unusual set of events for him, but brilliant stuff there from Maciej to take the opening round victory here in Season 8. Hopefully we can get some of our drivers in for an interview, and also we'll go through results in just a moment. As I now flicker between a few of my many windows to try to set some of this up. So apologies if there is a slightly clunky transition here, but hopefully we'll be underway, and hopefully we'll get some drivers joining us for an interview. That would be rather lovely here, especially from our podium finishers. I'd be dying to know what happened to some of our drivers that really did have a torrid time at the beginning of the race. I agree with those that said it in the chat. I can't imagine that they would have started on dry tyres, but the amount of time that they lost. I mean, Alexander Smolia just went nowhere off the line and just plummeted down outside the top 20 and just couldn't seem to hold it on the track in the open set corner. So maybe just an oversight on the setup or something, but certainly a disastrous time there for the number 6. He'll be hoping to come back stronger in the upcoming races. And just pulling out of the server now. Let's see if our results have come through. And indeed they have. So, opening round then, it's Malinowski that takes the race victory ahead of Stapleford. Brilliant challenge there from him. Both those drivers getting 4 and 5 positions respectively. Marco Bischoff rounding out the podium with Jarnier taking P4. Noah Eder that lost positions in the second half of the race. Did a phenomenal job early on, but just wasn't able to carry that momentum all the way to the end. Valentine Barrier snatching P6 away from Caracas at the very final corner. So the Frenchman, good result to get P6 in the end for him. Not sure how Caracas will feel in that, but maybe some post-race inquiries over some of those incidents. Then Caracas P7, Manar in P8 with Appel and Dario Iomolo rounding out the top 10. We then have George Boothby in P11 with Vassner, Penninan, Berenic, Walsingham rounding out our top 15, with then Schaefer, Anufriev, Del Fanta, Samuel Fock and Thomas Morant seeing us towards the top 20. Mark Gavina, Konstantin Soldatov and Hugo Boucher that took those next series spots, and it was McCormack that did take fastest lap honours in the end, almost got 23rd position, although I imagine that after the start of that race he he really won't feel too upset about losing that in relative terms, and a handful of points lost there, but he'll be looking to come back stronger. Isaac Price finishing in 25th. Another driver did a very early pit stop, but did seem to have reasonable pace early on, so I'm not sure if he underfueled the car or what it was that was going on inside the cockpit of that 31 car, but he was not having the race that he would have wanted. Manisha, Merles, Major, Langer and Lozanov round out towards the top 30, and then it is Addison, Garafulin, Detchik and Vanden Einde that see us down towards 34th, with a couple of our other drivers retiring as well in all of that. So difficult stuff for some of our drivers there today. Let's see, do we have anyone chiming in for an interview? Sadly, it appears not. Which is definitely a big shame, but without a doubt, Season Oper being absolutely brilliant in terms of playing host for Action. We'll give it a couple more minutes just see if anyone does care to join us for an interview. Because it would be lovely to hear from them, but I'm not entirely convinced, sadly, that we're going to get anybody coming in. But my goodness, what a fantastic season opener. It was all the action that we could have possibly expected from the LFM Pro Series. Season 7 set us up beautifully for what we could expect, and we had some new names, we had some returning names, and some brilliant drivers to complete the grid tonight here at Imola, and they gave us action in buckets, and I expect nothing less when we head to round 2 of the season. Speaking of which, we will be going to Barcelona. We'll be out the Circuit de Catalunya for round 2, which will be very much an interesting one. I think that might again be a track that falls quite nicely into the hands of cars like the Porsche, but watch out for George Boothby in the Ferrari as well. I imagine that car might be fairly racy there as well. And although he didn't quite have the outright pace to compete around here at Imola today, we kind of presumed that it would be a circuit that wouldn't suit that car, but we know how quick George Boothby can be. And we also, the magic that he can sometimes pull out of his car. So definitely keep an eye out for that man. But yeah, I think then by the looks of it, we're not going to have any interviews, unfortunately. But hopefully that will change in weeks to come. And we will be returning then in a week's time for the next round then at Barcelona, where we will see how the Pro Series drivers take to the next circuit and who will end up coming out on top there. Honours went to Malinowski tonight. Will he be able to make it 2 for 2, or will it be defending champion Marco Bischoff that returns to a spot that he knows so familiarly from Season 7? We'll have to wait and see. But if you want yourself to get involved in some of this action and battle it out amongst those that you see in the streams, then do consider heading over to lowfuelmotorsport.com, get yourself registered and get yourself a license, work through the ranks, and then you could be battling it out amongst the very best, where you see all of this action-packed glory and fight it out for some fantastic prizes here in the Pro Series. Also, do consider joining the Discord server as well if you want to stay up to date with all the latest news, everything to do LFM, both ACC and of course the emerging news of R Factor 2 on the horizon, so stay in tune for that. And also, it's a lovely community to just share all of that passion and everything good sim racing and real life motorsport as well, so do consider joining LFM on Discord as well. But it looks like then that is going to be it for this evening, so thank you everybody so much for the support in the stream tonight. We hit fantastic new viewing figures during this stream. It was a wonderful to have so many people in the chat and having you all join, and we also went past 700 subs today, which is incredible. We ended last season almost making it to 600, and now after just the first round of Season 8 we are up to 720. So thank you everybody so much for support. Glad that you are all loving the streams and all things LFM, and there will be lots more to come in the future, so do very much stay in tuned. Hope to see as many of you next week as possible for the next round of the Pro Series at Barcelona. But for this evening then, it is goodbye.